The night was calm in Seoul, South Korea. The city lights shimmered like stars on the ground, reflecting off the Han River that flowed quietly through the heart of the bustling metropolis. People went about their lives, some heading home after a long day at work, others enjoying late-night snacks at street vendors or chatting with friends over coffee. It was just another ordinary evening for most, but something extraordinary was about to happen. High above the Earth's atmosphere, an alien scout ship descended silently. Its sleek, metallic surface glinted faintly under the moonlight as it hovered over the city. The ship belonged to the Krazon, a race of extraterrestrial beings who had spent centuries exploring galaxies and conquering weaker species. They were tall, muscular creatures with scaly green skin, sharp claws, and glowing red eyes that seemed to pierce through anything they looked at. Their technology was far beyond what humans could imagine, and they viewed themselves as superior to all other life forms. The Krazon had heard rumors of Earth, a small blue planet teeming with primitive creatures called humans. These rumors intrigued them, not because they thought humans might pose any real threat, but because they wondered if there was anything worth taking from such a seemingly insignificant world. For years, they sent out probes and surveillance, drones to gather information, studying human behavior without ever making direct contact. Vraxo, the leader of this particular expedition, stood tall in the command center of the scout ship. He was a towering figure, even among his own kind, with jagged scars running down his arms that marked him as a seasoned warrior. His voice was deep and commanding, carrying an air of authority that no one dared to question. Vraxo stared at the holographic display showing images of Earth captured by their probes. "These humans," he muttered, his tone dripping with disdain. "They are weak. Look at how they fight each other. Clumsy, inefficient movements. No strategy, no discipline. How can they possibly survive in this universe?" Beside him, Zorak, his second in command, nodded in agreement. "Their weapons are crude. Their bodies fragile. We could crush them with ease if we chose to invade." Vraxo smirked, his jagged teeth flashing in the dim light of the control room. "Exactly. But why waste our resources? Let us observe further. Perhaps there is something of value here we can exploit without resorting to violence." Meanwhile, on the streets below, Jiho walked briskly toward his apartment. A young man in his mid-20s, Jiho had short black hair and a lean, athletic build. By day, he worked as a trainer at a local gym, helping people improve their strength and endurance. But it was his passion for martial arts that truly defined him. Every evening after finishing his shift, he would head to a nearby dojo to practice various combat techniques, kickboxing, taekwondo, judo, and more. To Jiho, fighting wasn't just about physical power, it was an art form, a way to express himself and push his limits. Jiho's best friend, Yuna, often teased him about his obsession with training. She was a cheerful woman with bright eyes and a warm smile, always ready with a joke or a kind word. Though she didn't share his love for martial arts, she admired his dedication and supported him wholeheartedly. That night, as Jiho left the dojo, she called him. "Hey, you done yet?" Yuna asked, her voice playful. "I'm starving, and I know you haven't eaten either. Let's grab some food." Jiho chuckled, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Sure thing. Just give me 10 minutes to change, and I'll meet you at the cafe near my place." As Jiho ended the call and started walking home, he felt a strange sensation, a tingling in the back of his neck, as though someone or something was watching him. He glanced around, but the streets were empty except for a few stray cats darting between parked cars. Shaking off the feeling, he quickened his pace. Unbeknownst to Jiho, the Krazon probe hovering high above had locked onto him. The drone recorded every movement he made, the way he carried himself, the precision in his steps, the subtle tension in his muscles. Back on the ship, Vraxo watched the footage intently. Most of the videos they collected showed humans engaging in mundane activities, playing sports, arguing, or simply going about their daily routines. But Jiho's actions caught his attention. "Pause," Vraxo ordered, pointing at the screen. "Rewind. Play again." The video replayed, showing Jiho sparring against multiple opponents in the dojo. Despite being outnumbered, he moved with incredible speed and agility, dodging attacks and countering with calculated strikes. Even Zorak raised an eyebrow. This one, He fights differently, Zorak remarked. There's a rhythm to his movements, almost like a dance. Primitive, yes, but intriguing. Vraxo leaned forward, his glowing eyes narrowing. Intriguing indeed. Let us see how this human fares when faced with true danger. Without hesitation, Vraxo gave the order. A beam of light shot down from the scout ship, enveloping Jiho in its glow. Before he could react, the young man vanished, leaving behind only a faint shimmer in the air. When Jiho opened his eyes, he found himself in a cold, metallic chamber. The walls hummed with an eerie energy, and strange symbols glowed faintly on the surfaces. Panic surged through him as he realized he was no longer on Earth. He tried to move, but invisible restraints held him in place. What is this? Where am I? Jiho shouted, his voice echoing in the confined space. A group of Krazan soldiers entered the room, their clawed hands gripping weapons that looked both terrifying and advanced. One of them stepped forward, speaking in a guttural language that Jiho couldn't understand. When he didn't respond, the creature growled and gestured impatiently. Though frightened, Jiho forced himself to stay calm. He had trained for years to handle pressure, and now was not the time to lose focus. As the Krazan studied him, he studied them in return, memorizing their movements and searching for weaknesses. Back on Earth, Yuna waited anxiously at the cafe. When Jiho failed to show up after an hour, she began to worry. She called his phone, repeatedly. But it went straight to voicemail. Something didn't feel right. Determined to find her friend, Yuna retraced Jiho's route from the dojo to his apartment. Along the way, she noticed peculiar marks on the ground. Scorch marks that looked unnatural. Her heart raced as she pieced together the evidence. Could it be possible? Had Jiho been abducted by aliens? Yuna knew she couldn't go to the authorities. They'd never believe her. Instead, she turned to the internet, diving into forums and articles about UFO sightings and extraterrestrial encounters. Slowly, she uncovered clues that pointed to the existence of intelligent life beyond Earth, and deep down, she vowed to do whatever it took to bring Jiho back. Little did she know, Jiho was already proving himself to be much stronger than anyone, including the Krazan, had anticipated. Jiho woke up in a dimly lit cell aboard the Krazan mothership. The air was cold and metallic, carrying a faint hum that vibrated through his body. His head throbbed and his muscles ached from being transported so abruptly. For a moment, he lay, still trying to make sense of where he was. The walls around him were smooth and gray, glowing faintly with strange symbols that pulsed like living things. There were no windows, no doors, just an eerie sense of isolation. As Jiho sat up, his mind raced. He remembered walking home from the dojo, feeling that odd sensation of being watched. And then, nothing. Whatever had happened, it wasn't natural. He clenched his fists, forcing himself to stay calm. Panic wouldn't help him here. Years of martial arts training had taught him discipline, and now was the time to use it. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed outside the cell. Jiho turned his head sharply toward the source. A group of Krazan soldiers approached, their towering forms casting long shadows on the glowing walls. They were even more intimidating up close, muscular, scaly creatures with sharp claws and glowing red eyes that seemed to pierce right through him. One of them carried a device that emitted a low buzzing noise, which caused the wall behind Jiho to dissolve into a shimmering portal. Two of the Krazan entered the cell, their weapons trained on him. Jiho's heart pounded, but he kept his breathing steady. He scanned the room for anything he could use as a weapon or tool, a pipe, a loose panel, anything. But there was nothing. Just the cold, empty space and the aliens staring at him like he was some kind of lab rat. One of the Krazan growled something in its guttural language. Jiho didn't understand the words, but the tone was clear enough. It was a command. When Jiho didn't move immediately, one of the creatures stepped forward and grabbed him by the arm, its claws digging painfully into his skin. Instinct took over. Jiho twisted his body, using the creature's momentum against it. With a swift motion, he broke free and delivered a hard kick to its midsection. The Krazan stumbled back, momentarily stunned. The other alien reacted quickly, swinging its weapon toward Jiho. But Jiho ducked under the blow and countered with a punch aimed at its throat. The Krazan let out a strangled gasp before collapsing to the ground. Jiho spun around, ready to face the remaining soldier, but more Krazan poured into the cell. Overwhelmed by sheer numbers, Jiho fought valiantly, landing several blows before they finally subdued him with a shock from a handheld device. His vision blurred, and his limbs went limp as he collapsed to the floor. Despite the loss, Jiho felt a flicker of satisfaction. He had proven that he wasn't helpless, that he could fight back, even against beings who considered themselves superior. As the Krazan dragged him out of the cell, he noticed something else, a glimmer of surprise in their glowing red eyes. Maybe they hadn't expected this much resistance from a primitive human. On Earth, Yuna paced nervously in her apartment. It had been hours since Jiho disappeared, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had happened. Her search along his usual route had led her to those strange scorch marks on the ground, marks that looked far too precise to be accidental. She had spent the night researching online, combing through forums and articles about UFO sightings and abductions. At first, the idea seemed absurd, but the evidence was piling up. Something, or someone, had taken Jiho, and it wasn't human. Desperate for answers, Yuna decided to reach out to Dr. Minsu, a scientist known for his unconventional theories about extraterrestrial life. She found his contact information buried in an obscure article about government cover-ups and sent him a message explaining what had happened. To her surprise, he responded almost immediately, inviting her to meet at his lab. Dr. Minsu was a wiry man in his 50s with messy gray hair and glasses that always seemed slightly askew. His lab was cluttered with gadgets, screens, and stacks of papers covered in equations and diagrams. Despite the chaos, there was a brilliance in his eyes, an intensity that told Yuna he believed every word she said. "You're telling me your friend was abducted by aliens?" Dr. Minsu asked, leaning forward in his chair. "Do you have any proof?" Yuna hesitated, then pulled out her phone and showed him photos of the scorch marks. "I don't know what else it could be. Jiho wouldn't just disappear like this." "Doctor." Minsu studied the images carefully, his brow furrowed in thought. After a moment, he nodded. "These marks are consistent with energy signatures I've detected in certain UFO hotspots. If your friend was taken, we might be able to track the signal." Yuna's heart leapt with hope. "Can you do it? Can you find him?" "It won't. Be easy," Dr. Minsu admitted. "But I think we can try. First, we'll need access to satellite data and some specialized equipment, and we'll have to work fast. If they're planning to leave Earth's orbit, we don't have much time." Back aboard the Krazan ship, Jiho regained consciousness in a larger chamber filled with glowing consoles and alien technology. Chains bound his wrists and ankles, securing him to a metal table. Around him, Krazan scientists bustled about, examining him like a specimen under a microscope. Their voices buzzed in their harsh language, occasionally punctuated by clicks and growls. Jiho tested the restraints, but they held firm. Instead of struggling, he focused on observing his surroundings. The Krazan seemed fascinated by him, poking and prodding with strange devices that emitted soft beams of light. One of them pressed a probe against his arm, causing a brief sting. Jiho gritted his teeth but remained silent, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing him react. After what felt like hours, the chains released, and Jiho was escorted to another part of the ship. This area was darker, with high ceilings, and rows of cells lining the walls. Most of the cells were empty, but a few contained other prisoners, humans who looked haggard and defeated. Jiho recognized one of them as a young woman named Sohee, whom he'd seen jogging near the park near his apartment. Her eyes widened when she saw him. "Jiho?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Is that really you?" He nodded, giving her a small smile. "Yeah, it's me. Are you okay?" Sohee shook her head. "They've been experimenting on us, taking samples, running tests. I don't know why they brought you here, but you shouldn't have come." Before Jiho could respond, the Krazan guards pushed him into an adjacent cell. The door sealed shut behind him, leaving him alone once again. Despite the grim situation, Jiho refused to let despair take hold. He had survived worse odds, and he wasn't about to give up now. Over the next few days, Jiho observed everything, the routines of the guards, the layout of the corridors, the way the energy fields worked. He memorized patterns and noted weaknesses. Though he didn't have a plan yet, he knew preparation was key. Every detail mattered. Then came the announcement. Vraxo, the leader of the Krazon, appeared in front of Jiho's cell. His massive frame loomed over the smaller human, his glowing eyes filled with both curiosity and disdain. "You fight well for a primitive," Vraxo said in broken English, his voice deep and gravelly. "But strength alone is meaningless without purpose. Prove your worth, or die." Jiho met his gaze without flinching. "What do you want from me?" Vraxo smirked, revealing jagged teeth. "You will face our greatest warriors in the arena. If you survive, perhaps we will reconsider our opinion of your species." Jiho didn't hesitate. "Fine, I'll fight." Though the odds were stacked against him, Jiho felt a spark of determination ignite within him. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proving that humanity wasn't weak, that humans weren't to be underestimated. Whatever awaited him in the arena, he would face it head-on, and maybe, just maybe, he could turn the tables on the Krazon. The arena was unlike anything Jiho had ever seen. It stretched wide and open, with towering walls made of shimmering metal that seemed to pulse with energy. The floor was a rough, uneven surface covered in jagged rocks and patches of glowing, moss-like plants that emitted faint light. Above, the ceiling was domed and transparent, revealing the vast expanse of space beyond. The swirling stars and distant planets served as a haunting reminder of how far he was from Earth. Jiho stood at the center of the arena, his hands bound by energy cuffs that hummed softly against his skin. Around him, rows upon rows of Krazon filled the stands, their glowing red eyes fixed on him like predators watching prey. Their growls and clicks echoed through the chamber, creating an unsettling chorus. Some jeered loudly, while others leaned forward with expressions of curiosity or disbelief. To them, this human was nothing more than a curiosity, a weak creature about to meet its end. Vraxo, the leader of the Krazon, sat high above the crowd on a raised platform. His massive form loomed over everyone else, and his jagged scars gleamed under the dim lighting. He watched Jiho intently, his clawed hands resting on the armrests of his throne-like seat. Beside him, Zorak, his second-in-command, muttered something in their guttural language. Vraxo nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. A loud horn blared, silencing the crowd. From one side of the arena, a massive gate slid open, revealing a monstrous creature. It was a Xylac, a hulking beast with scaly gray skin, sharp claws longer than Jiho's forearm, and rows of teeth that looked capable of tearing through steel. Its eyes glowed yellow, and it moved with surprising speed for something so large. The crowd erupted into cheers and roars of excitement as the Xylac entered the arena, letting out a deafening roar that shook the ground beneath Jiho's feet. Jiho felt his heart race, but he forced himself to breathe deeply. He had trained for situations like this, not exactly fighting alien monsters, of course, but facing opponents who were bigger, stronger, and more intimidating. Martial arts weren't just about physical strength. They were about strategy, timing, and exploiting weaknesses. And right now, Jiho needed all of those skills if he wanted to survive. The energy cuffs around his wrists suddenly deactivated, falling to the ground with a metallic clink. Jiho flexed his fingers, feeling the familiar sensation of freedom return to his hands. He crouched slightly, lowering his center of gravity and raising his fists in a defensive stance. His eyes locked onto the Xylac, studying its movements carefully. Every twitch, every step, it all mattered. The Xylac charged first, moving faster than Jiho expected. Its claws slashed downward, narrowly missing him as he sidestepped. The force of the blow cracked the rocky ground where he had been standing moments before. Jiho countered with a swift kick aimed at the creature's knee joint, hoping to destabilize it. The impact sent a jolt of pain through his leg, but it worked. The Xylac stumbled briefly, giving Jiho precious seconds to regroup. The crowd grew louder, their voices rising in a mix of surprise and bloodlust. No one had anticipated this human lasting even a minute against a Xylac. Yet here he was, dodging and striking with precision, refusing to back down. The fight continued, each exchange becoming more intense. The Xylac swung wildly, its claws slicing, through the air with terrifying speed. Jiho ducked, rolled, and weaved, using every ounce of agility he possessed to avoid being torn apart. When the opportunity arose, he struck, targeting vulnerable spots like the creature's throat, joints, and eyes. Each hit was calculated, designed to weaken the Xylac without exhausting himself too quickly. But the Xylac wasn't easy to defeat. Its thick hide absorbed most of Jiho's blows, and its sheer size made it difficult to maneuver around. One swipe caught Jiho off guard, sending him sprawling across the rocky floor. Pain shot through his ribs as he landed hard, and for a moment he thought he might have broken something. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead, dripping into his eye, but he blinked it away, gritting his teeth. The Xylac loomed over him, ready to deliver the final blow. But Jiho wasn't done yet. Summoning every bit of strength he had left, he rolled to the side just as the creature's claws came crashing down. Springing to his feet, he grabbed a shard of broken rock from the ground and hurled it at the Xylac's face. The makeshift projectile struck true, lodging itself in the creature's glowing yellow eye. The Xylac let out a deafening roar of pain, thrashing wildly as it tried to dislodge the shard. Seizing the moment, Jiho closed the distance between them. With a powerful leap, he delivered a spinning kick directly to the Xylac's head, knocking it off balance. The creature staggered backward, crashing into the wall with a thunderous boom. For a brief moment, silence fell over the arena as the Xylac slumped to the ground, unconscious. Jiho stood panting, his chest heaving as adrenaline coursed through his veins. His body ached, and blood dripped from multiple wounds, but he remained upright, his gaze steady. Slowly, the reality of what he had accomplished began to sink in. He had defeated a Xylac, a creature the Krazon considered nearly invincible. For a long moment, the crowd was silent. Then, like a tidal wave, the noise returned. Gasps, murmurs, and finally, applause. Even the Krazon couldn't deny the skill and determination they had just witnessed. Vraxo leaned forward in his seat. His glowing red eyes narrowed as he studied Jiho. There was no mockery in his expression now, only thoughtful contemplation. Back on Earth, Yuna and Dr. Minsu worked tirelessly in the lab. They had managed to track the energy signature left behind when Jiho was abducted, narrowing down the location of the Krazon mothership to somewhere near the moon's orbit. Using hacked satellite data and experimental technology, they pieced together a plan to rescue him. "This is insane," Yuna muttered, staring at the screen displaying their calculations. "Even if we find the ship, how are we supposed to get inside? We're talking about aliens with weapons we can't even comprehend." Dr. Minsu adjusted his glasses, his voice calm but firm. "We don't need to storm the place. If we can disrupt their energy field long enough, we might be able to create an opening. Once we do that, we'll send a signal to Jiho. If he's still alive, he'll know what to do." Yuna nodded, though doubt lingered in her mind. She trusted Dr. Minsu's expertise, but she couldn't shake the fear that they might already be too late. Still, she refused to give up. Jiho had always been there for her, supporting her through thick and thin. Now it was her turn to bring him home. On the Krazon ship, word of Jiho's victory spread quickly. Other prisoners, humans abducted alongside him, began to see him in a new light. So he, the young woman from his cell block, approached him cautiously. After the fight, "How did you do it?" she asked, her voice filled with awe. "I've never seen anyone take down a Xylac like that." Jiho shrugged, wincing as the movement pulled at his injuries. "It's not about being stronger. It's about knowing how to use what you've got. You don't have to be fearless. You just have to keep moving." Inspired by his words, Sohee hesitated before speaking again. "Do you think maybe you could teach us? Some of the others want to learn. If we're going to survive here, we need to be able to defend ourselves." Jiho considered her request. He knew he couldn't save everyone on his own, but if he could pass on some of his knowledge, maybe they'd stand a better chance. "All right," he said finally, "but it won't be easy. You'll have to trust me and follow my lead." Over the next few days, Jiho began teaching the other prisoners basic self-defense techniques. At first, many struggled, their bodies weakened by captivity and despair. But slowly, they started to improve, gaining confidence with each session. What began as individual lessons turned into group training sessions, fostering a sense of unity among the humans. For the first time since their abduction, they felt a glimmer of hope. Meanwhile, Vraxo called Jiho to his chambers. The Krazon leader studied him closely, his tone less dismissive than before. "You are not like the others," he said gruffly. "Your kind is primitive, yet you possess qualities I did not expect." Jiho met his gaze evenly. "Humans adapt. That's what makes us strong." Vraxo's lips curled into a slight smirk. "Perhaps, but strength alone does not guarantee survival. Prove yourself further, or your efforts will mean nothing." As Jiho left the chamber, he realized something important. The Krazon were beginning to see humanity differently, and maybe, just maybe, that change in perspective could make all the difference. Days turned into weeks aboard the Krazon mothership, and Jiho's reputation continued to grow. Word of his victory over the Xylac spread not only among the human prisoners, but also throughout the ranks of the Krazon themselves. While many still viewed humans as weak and insignificant, others began to see them in a new light, thanks in large part to Jiho's actions. Jiho spent most of his time training the other prisoners. Using the limited space available, he taught them basic self-defense techniques, focusing on speed, agility, and teamwork. The lessons weren't just about physical strength, they were about mindset. He reminded them that fear was natural, but it didn't have to control them. "We may not have their weapons or technology," he told them during one session, "but we have something they don't expect: heart." The prisoners embraced this philosophy with growing enthusiasm. At first, some were hesitant, unsure if fighting back would make any difference. But Jiho's persistence and his belief in their potential inspired them to push through their doubts. Even Sohi, who had initially seemed fragile and defeated, surprised everyone with her determination. She became one of the fastest learners, mastering quick footwork and precise strikes that impressed even Jiho. As the humans grew stronger, so did their unity. They began working together, sharing ideas and supporting each other. What started as individual acts of defiance evolved into a collective effort to resist their captors. The Krazon noticed this shift and grew uneasy. Guards patrolled more frequently, their movements tense and alert. Some of the higher-ranking officers muttered among themselves, questioning whether keeping the humans alive was worth the risk. Vraxo, however, remained conflicted. On one hand, he admired Jiho's resilience and adaptability, qualities he respected in any warrior. On the other hand, he couldn't ignore the growing unrest among his own people. Many Krazon soldiers had begun to doubt humanity's supposed weakness, pointing to Jiho's victories as proof that humans might be more dangerous than they appeared. Determined to settle the matter once and for all, Vraxo summoned Jiho to the arena again. This time, instead of facing a beast, Jiho would face Vraxo himself, a direct challenge from the Krazon leader. The announcement sent ripples through both the alien spectators and the human prisoners. No one had ever seen Vraxo fight before, and the idea of him taking on a mere human sparked intense curiosity. When Jiho entered the arena, the crowd erupted into cheers and jeers. Vraxo stood at the center, towering over everything around him. His jagged scars glowed faintly under the dim lighting, and his claws flexed as he prepared for battle. Jiho approached cautiously, his body tense but his mind sharp. He knew this wouldn't be an ordinary fight. Vraxo was far stronger, faster, and more experienced than any opponent Jiho had faced before. But Jiho also knew that brute force alone wouldn't win this fight. It would take strategy, patience, and every ounce of skill he possessed. The horn blared, signaling the start of the duel. Vraxo charged forward with terrifying speed, his claws slashing through the air like blades. Jiho dodged just in time, feeling the rush of wind as Vraxo's attack missed him by inches. He countered with a swift kick aimed at Vraxo's knee joint, hoping to slow him down. The blow landed, but Vraxo barely flinched. Instead, he grabbed Jiho by the arm and hurled him across the arena. Jiho hit the ground hard, pain shooting through his shoulder. For a moment he lay there, struggling to catch his breath. The crowd roared, convinced the fight was already over, but Jiho refused to give up. Slowly he pushed himself to his feet, blood dripping from fresh wounds, but his gaze unwavering. "You fight well," Vraxo said, his voice deep and gravelly, "but you cannot win." "We'll see," Jiho replied, his tone steady, despite the odds stacked against him. The two clashed repeatedly, each exchange testing Jiho's limits. Vraxo's sheer power made every strike feel like being hit by a freight train, but Jiho used his smaller size to his advantage, darting in and out of range and targeting vulnerable spots whenever possible. He focused on areas where Vraxo's armor was weakest, his joints, throat, and eyes. Though none of his attacks caused serious damage, they added up, forcing Vraxo to exert more energy than he expected. The longer the fight dragged on, the angrier Vraxo became. His movements grew reckless, leaving openings that Jiho exploited with precision. One particularly daring move allowed Jiho to land a spinning kick directly to Vraxo's chest, sending the massive alien stumbling backward. The crowd gasped in shock. Never before had anyone managed to injure their leader in combat. Realizing he was losing control of the fight, Vraxo unleashed a devastating flurry of attacks. Jiho barely managed to evade them, his body screaming in protest as exhaustion set. And just when it seemed like Vraxo would finally overpower him, Jiho spotted an opening, a brief moment when Vraxo's guard dropped. Summoning every last bit of strength, Jiho lunged forward and delivered a powerful punch to Vraxo's throat. The impact stunned Vraxo, causing him to stagger and fall to one knee. Silence fell over the arena as everyone watched in disbelief. Jiho stood above him, breathing heavily but refusing to look away. He hadn't killed Vraxo, that wasn't his goal, but he had proven his point. Humans were not to be underestimated. Back on Earth, Yuna and Dr. Minsu finalized their rescue plan. Using hacked satellite data and experimental equipment, they pinpointed the exact location of the Krazon mothership. Their device, a modified electromagnetic pulse generator, was designed to disrupt the ship's energy field long enough to create an opening for communication. "This is it," Dr. Minsu said, adjusting the settings on the machine. "Once we activate the pulse, we'll send a signal to Jiho. If he can get to the escape pods, we can guide him back to Earth." Yuna nodded, clutching the transmitter tightly in her hands. "Let's hope he's ready." They launched the pulse, watching anxiously as the readings on their screens fluctuated. Moments later, a faint response came through, a series of clicks and static, followed by a single word. "Understood." Jiho heard the message loud and clear. During his time aboard the ship, he had learned fragments of the Krazan language and figured out how to use their communication systems. When the energy field faltered, he seized the opportunity, rallying the other prisoners to follow him toward the escape pods. The journey wasn't easy. Alarms blared throughout the ship, and Krazan guards scrambled to stop them. Jiho led the charge, using everything he had taught the others to fend off their attackers. Together, they fought their way to freedom, relying on teamwork and courage to overcome overwhelming odds. As the last of the escape pods launched, Jiho hesitated. He knew he couldn't leave yet, not while the Krazan still posed a threat to Earth. Turning to the remaining prisoners, he gave them a firm nod. "Go. I'll hold them off until you're safe." Reluctantly, they obeyed, climbing into the pods and blasting away from the mothership. Jiho stayed behind, confronting Vraxo one final time. Though battered and bruised, he stood tall, his resolve unshaken. "You've underestimated us," Jiho said, his voice clear and strong. "And because of that, your plans will fail." Vraxo regarded him with a mixture of anger and respect. "You are different. Perhaps your kind deserves another chance." With that, the Krazan leader ordered his troops to stand down. The mothership began retreating from Earth's orbit, its mission abandoned. For now. On Earth, Yuna waited anxiously as the escape pods descended. When Jiho finally emerged, battered but alive, she ran to him, tears streaming down her face. "I knew you'd make it," she whispered, hugging him tightly. Jiho smiled weakly, leaning on her for support. "We did it together, all of us." Though scarred by his experiences, Jiho knew he had changed something important. The Krazan had seen humanity's true strength, not just in combat, but in unity and perseverance. And somewhere deep in space, the aliens remembered the name of the human who defied them: Jiho. The Krazan mothership retreated into the depths of space, its massive form disappearing into the endless void. On board, Vraxo stood in silence, staring out at the stars through the ship's transparent dome. His glowing red eyes reflected the faint light of distant suns as he replayed the events of the past weeks in his mind. The humans, those small, fragile creatures he had once dismissed as insignificant, had proven themselves to be far more than he had anticipated. Jiho, in particular, had left an indelible mark on him. Vraxo clenched his fists, the jagged scars on his arms standing out against his green skin. He had never been defeated in combat before, yet this human had managed to do what no other species had ever accomplished. It wasn't just physical strength that had won the fight, it was something deeper, something Vraxo couldn't quite put into words. Strategy, adaptability, resilience, and perhaps even a sense of purpose. These were qualities he had always valued in warriors, but he had never expected to find them in such an unlikely place. Zorak approached cautiously, sensing his leader's mood. "What are your orders, Commander?" he asked, his tone respectful, but tinged with curiosity. Vraxo didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned to face Zorak, his expression unreadable. "We underestimated them," he said finally, his voice low and gravelly. "Humans are not weak. They may lack our technology, but they possess something we cannot replicate, a spirit that refuses to break." Zorak nodded slowly, processing his leader's words. "Do you think they pose a threat to us?" Vraxo considered the question for a moment. "Not yet. But if we push them too far, they will rise against us. And when they do, they will not stop until they have taken everything we hold dear." He paused, his gaze hardening. "For now, we leave Earth alone. Let them rebuild, let them grow stronger. Perhaps one day they will become allies rather than enemies." With that, Vraxo issued the command to alter course, steering the ship away from Earth and toward uncharted regions of the galaxy. As the vessels sped through the cosmos, the crew began to discuss what they had witnessed. Stories of Jiho's victories spread among the ranks, sparking debates about humanity's potential. Some viewed the humans as dangerous adversaries who should be eradicated before they became a greater threat. Others saw them as a fascinating anomaly, worthy of study and perhaps even admiration. Back on Earth, the escape pods carrying Jiho and the other prisoners landed safely in a remote forest outside Seoul. Emergency response teams arrived shortly after, alerted by Dr. Minsu and Yuna. Paramedics rushed to treat the survivors, tending to their injuries and providing blankets to ward off the cold night air. Despite their exhaustion, many of the former captives wore expressions of relief and gratitude, knowing they were finally home. Jiho sat on the ground, leaning against a tree as medical staff checked his wounds. His body ached from head to toe, and fresh bandages covered cuts and bruises that would take weeks to heal. Yet none of that mattered to him. All he could think about was the fact that he was alive, and that he had made a difference. Yuna knelt beside him, her hands resting gently on his shoulders. "You did it," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "You saved everyone." Jiho shook his head, wincing slightly at the movement. "Not just me. Everyone played a part. We did it together." Dr. Minsu joined them, holding a tablet filled with data collected during the rescue mission. "You've given us proof of extraterrestrial life," he said, his tone filled with awe. "This changes everything. Governments, scientists, the public, they'll all want answers." Jiho frowned, his brow furrowing in thought. "But will they believe us? Will they understand what happened up there?" "They will," Yuna replied firmly, "because you're here to tell them, because we all are." Over the following days, news of the alien encounter spread rapidly across the globe. Journalists swarmed the survivors, eager to hear their stories. Scientists conducted interviews and ran tests, analyzing every detail of the event. While some skeptics dismissed the claims as hoaxes or mass hysteria, undeniable evidence, photos of the scorch marks, video footage of the rescue operation, and first-hand accounts from dozens of witnesses forced even the most hardened doubters to reconsider. Jiho became the face of the story, hailed as a hero both for his bravery and for his role in proving humanity's strength. Media outlets dubbed him the Human Warrior, highlighting his victories in the arena and his leadership among the prisoners. Invitations poured in from universities, governments, and organizations around the world, all wanting to hear him speak about his experiences. At first, Jiho hesitated. He wasn't used to being in the spotlight, and the attention made him uncomfortable. But Yuna encouraged him to share his story, reminding him of the impact it could have. "People need to know what you did," she told him. "They need to see that we're capable of standing up to anything, even aliens." Eventually, Jiho agreed. He began giving talks at conferences and events, speaking not only about his time aboard the Krazon ship, but also about the lessons he had learned. "Strength isn't about size or power," he explained during one speech. "It's about how you use what you have. It's about working together, believing in yourself, and never giving up no matter how impossible things seem." His words resonated deeply, inspiring millions of people worldwide. Martial arts schools reported a surge in enrollment, with students eager to learn self-defense techniques like Jiho's. Social media platforms buzzed with hashtags like human spirit and never give up, celebrating the resilience and unity demonstrated by the survivors. Even governments took notice, investing in research and defense programs aimed at preparing for future encounters with extraterrestrial life. As weeks turned into months, life began to return to normal, for most people at least. Jiho continued, teaching martial arts at his gym, though his classes now included lectures on mental toughness and teamwork. Yuna stayed by his side, helping him navigate the challenges of fame while pursuing her own career as a journalist. Together, they formed a foundation dedicated to supporting others who had experienced trauma or hardship, using their platform to make a positive impact. One evening, as Jiho walked home from the dojo, he found himself stopping to gaze up at the stars. The sky was clear, dotted with countless pinpricks of light that stretched endlessly above him. For a moment, he felt a pang of unease, wondering if the Krazon or another alien race might return someday. But then he remembered the faces of the people he had fought alongside, the bonds they had forged, and the strength they had discovered within themselves. Whatever came next, Jiho knew humanity would be ready. Not because they were invincible, but because they had proven they could adapt, persevere, and stand united in the face of adversity. And somewhere deep in space, the Krazon remembered the name of the human who changed their perspective forever, Jiho. As he turned and walked away, Jiho smiled faintly, feeling a quiet sense of peace. The universe was vast and unpredictable, but for now, Earth was safe, and that was enough.